Mousesports was a team dominated for the last year or so by one name, and that was the player Nico, because Nico legitimately was one of the 2 or 3 best players in all of Counter-Strike, an incredibly complete player and a very, very dominant player offline. So every time you watched Mousesports, you just looked to see what could Nico do. Is Nico good enough to carry this team? People even nicknamed them in almost a derogatory fashion, Nico Sports, as though they were just about this one player. Now, over that period of time that they had him, they tried some roster moves, and some of them had a little success, but in general, the core style of the team remained fairly similar, and the lack of results continued to haunt them. So while Nico was amazing, Mousesports wasn't amazing. Now, with Nico's departure, they were able to integrate a couple of players into this lineup that they hadn't used before and get a very different flavor to Mousesports. So whereas before it was just Nico, he was the one star and he had to carry the game, now it's very much more done by committee in Mousesports. Now they've got a whole bunch of talented players. They've got a much more multinational team even. They brought in even more kind of disparate elements together. And so the average skill level of the team has risen a lot. The style of play of the team has changed a lot. They've moved out some of the core players and people have switched around some of the roles. And so this Mousesports is nothing like the Nico Sports of yesteryear. Instead, this is a team that doesn't rely on a player like Nico. Obviously, he's not there anymore. But they don't even just rely on the superstar in terms of Oscar. They've got a pretty solid team throughout the squad, many of them inexperienced, some of them quite young. And they're a team that's really got a lot of potential. And it feels like as the tournaments go on, they improve steadily, they beat out tier 2 teams. And now finally, we're seeing not only can they upset the tier 1 teams, but it's only really the elite tier 1 teams that consistently can get a win over them. So it feels like they have moved up the ranks and they've proven they've started a new legacy that's nothing to do with Nico. It's something special in its own right. And we want to see, can that continue at the level of the majors? The star player of Mousesports is Oscar. And he is a player who has quite a confusing history, because in terms of playing at the top level internationally, you'd look and you'd say it's only really been happening for the last 1 to 2 years in CSGO. But he is a player who was playing a decade ago in Counter-Strike 1.6. But back at that time, we didn't have multinational teams. If you were a player from a lesser region that didn't have very good teams in your area, you had no choice. You were just locked into playing with those teams and your fortunes would go as those teams go. So Oscar was around, he was in the Czech Republic, he was playing with teams from that region, and people were aware on some level that this is a talented player, perhaps he's someone with potential, but there was no opportunity to go elsewhere, to find a better team and to really have the platform to show off his skills on the international level. So that talent was just resigned to smaller tournaments or qualifiers or the odd online game or occasionally a frag movie. We didn't really get to see what would happen if Oscar was on a team good enough where he could go head to head with, well, nowadays the likes of a Cold Zera, a Nico. Well, now we get to see that in Mousesports, and the results have been pretty favorable overall. Because as soon as he came into the team when Nico was around, already online, you start to see some rumblings that, hey, these two could be a superstar duo. In Hellraisers, he'd been the Nico of that team. He was the primary carry, and the rest of the team really just lived and died by his level of play. And against tier 2, it was very good. In Mousesports, he was playing against tier 1. Initially, he had some problems in the team. He was in and out of the lineup. Towards the end of Nico's tenure, he came back in. He had his own good performances at DreamHack Vegas. And ever since Nico departed from the team, Oscar has really kind of inherited the mantle of the star player of the team, and he has lived up to it. He has had some super duper performances, phenomenal level of play. He really is a LAN player. He's also someone where he was known to have a good rifle before the Hellraisers days, but since then, we know him as one of the world's best AWPers. He's someone who's got a pretty fast AWP, very reliable, and there's a reason why individual players in Europe, even outside the context of Mousesports, really rate this guy as one of the best talents we have and one of the most skilled players. And so even though in terms of his actual age, he's getting up there, you know, he's been playing a long time, because he hasn't played at the top level, this top international level where he has a chance to prove himself, I feel like he's still a very hungry guy. And he's a guy who wants to prove that it wasn't just being stuck in that country, like I was just a big fish in a small pond. He wants to show he's one of the world's best players. And in Mousesports, he's finally got the vehicle where he can do that. The newest member of Mousesports is a fantastic story in his own right. If you look back to when Mousesports was dominated by Nico, that was a storyline that could have come from a movie. A guy just comes from Bosnia, a little country without much history in Counter-Strike, becomes arguably the best player in the world, playing for a multinational team, even if the team itself wasn't at his level, and he's kind of really exceeding expectations at every level. That's a pretty cool story, but we already roughly knew who Nico was before mousesports. People knew he was a talent, people knew from that region he was one of the rising stars who one day could do something. In terms of ropes, people literally only knew who this guy was, coming from Estonia, thanks to playing in FPL, thanks to playing with other pro-level players, just in online mix games, never playing at a competitive level, never playing for any team even at tier 3, never playing online tournaments with people. He had someone who has a completely blank slate. And so when he finally accepted the offer to come and play for a professional team, and it was mousesports, a multinational team where someone like him could get a break, there was a lot of eyes on him, a lot of attention, and people generally were probably wondering, is he going to fail? And the fact that he's never played at a competitive level, but he's been thrown straight in there in big offline tournaments, playing against some of the best teams in the world, playing with some experienced players and some very good players as well, but from a totally different culture, totally different background, with no kind of links together throughout their history. I think that really shows that his talent is transferring itself over to competitive play. And he still has some levels to go to match what he's done in FPL when he just plays and everyone's playing a mixed style. But he's clearly a talent. He's someone who's still very young. He's growing. He's getting his experience. And we look to him down the line. Can he be a superstar player? Can he one day inherit kind of the spot of being the #1 guy in mousesports and therefore one of the best players in the world? The thing that Ropes is actually primarily known for as well, that I think is a really positive sign for him, is he's not just an aim star. He's not just a guy who gets a lot of frags and that's where he gets his attention. People have noted that he's someone, when he did play those FPL games with other professional players who know all the ins and outs and what to do, he's someone who showed himself to have a pretty good game sense, to have a good feel for what's happening in a match, to make intelligent plays, to outplay people on a cerebral level. And I feel like that's a quality that actually a lot of young rookies, rising stars, they have the aim, they have the explosive capabilities, the raw mechanical skill, but oftentimes it's the veterans you expect to have the cerebral approach to the game, the good feel for the game. So I feel like coming in early with that is something that's going to stand him in very good stead and help him adapt to the professional scene very quickly.